All right. Highway Department. Well, as most may know, with all of the lofty titles I have, I am also the Director of Public Works. It's not uncommon for towns to have somebody who oversees their utility department and somebody who oversees their highway department. You wouldn't want me out plowing, you wouldn't want me working on the truck, but I do work with our various foremen to make the financial decisions and the staffing and service decisions for the town. That's why Pete's not here, and that's why I'm here, because Pete says that's not his job. It's my job to explain this stuff.
Page are we on?
We're gonna go to page 3. You'll see Public Works. And they do have some income, but it's you see this top line there, state grant highways, it's 115,000. That is a formula grant. We don't apply for it. The state looks at every town and how much money they have and how many miles of roads we have, and they tell us that they're gonna get a sum of money. We don't find that out till after the state sets their budget. Sometimes it goes up a little bit, sometimes it goes down a little bit, but that's money that we get in that neighborhood every year without applying for it. After that, if anybody wanted to get rid of state paperwork where it says $250 weight permits, at 25 different companies that have to send every town they do business in a form and pay us $10 so that their trucks can go through our town. I don't like signing that many of them. I can't imagine when somebody's doing it in an office having to send out to 100 different towns what they're doing with that. So that comes from. And that's the excitement of highway income. If anybody has any questions? And highway expense is on page. There's a lot of different departments in the highway, but if you look at page 12, you'll see highway maintenance. And that whole section that's on page 12, that has to do, it has all of the wages, and it has to do with the work of keeping our roads in shape. So that's what this section is. I think I mentioned at the last meeting that Pete, the foreman, is scheduled to retire this year. We brought a young person on over the summer. We always have, 4 is the staff. Right now we have 5, but that will go to 4 when Pete retires. I think we have somewhere around 40 miles of roads, which is kind of small for a town, but we have 4 plow routes that are with the big trucks, and then we send a couple of small trucks out with help from the water and sewer department or the fire department driving the small little roads and things like that. I really couldn't see getting by with 3, and I couldn't see having 5 full-time people unless the town wanted a lot more. We do a lot of outside contracting to meet demand for specific jobs. Like a few years ago, there was a concern amongst many of the merchants that it was taking us too long to get the snow out of downtown. We'd have a big storm. The guys would be out plowing all night. They didn't go in the next night and take it all out. We got to do it at night when the parking ban is, so we can no longer do that. So we said, all right, well, we will guarantee, so to speak, that we'll have the snow out within 48 hours. And when we do that, we hire a couple of local contractors to help with their dump trucks. So we go take it off, truck it out of town. We don't just do it piecemeal with our own guys, and having one extra guy on just for that doesn't really help out. We also contract out a lot of the mowing that we do, like the prisoners, for those who remember that much, used to do a lot of that when they left. We do some of our own mowing, but we contract that out. They provide their equipment and all the staffing during that busy time of year. One of the other comments, I get is that we could put more salt on the roads. And we admittedly don't put as much salt on as other towns do. And that's this line items that directly, it was 40,000 last year. It's down to 35. That just had more to do with how much we spent last year. But if that was something you're hearing in the community, we need to put more salt on the roads. That's where that line item would come from. Sometimes there's availability issues and there's always storage issues, but that's just one public comment that comes up. When you turn on to page 13, there's some other dam monitoring fee falls into that. Back for those who remember when we spent $4.5 million on the dam, we have a little monitor that tells us when the water goes up too fast or goes down too fast, and we pay for that service, and we pay to have it inspected every so often. Something that is was new in the current year is cemetery maintenance. We have a cemetery association. They would request funds, then they would pay to have the cemetery mowed. There was a long-serving employee that did that for them at a very below market rate, and unfortunately, that person had some health issues. I think may have passed away, and so they had to pay market rate to get that done. And in the mean, basically all the money that they were getting from their outside agency allocation was going towards that. But over the last few years, and Kathy can certainly speak to this, there have been issues with tree maintenance in the cemetery, stone maintenance, whether it's just, our community responsibility to maintain the cemetery and the history that it represents, that all that was falling behind. So with this current fiscal year, we looked at moving the expense of keeping the cemetery landscaping done into the highway budget. We still contract that out, and then have the cemetery association being able to allocate the funds they get through their separate allocation for the things that I would say are more traditionally looked at is maintaining the integrity of the cemetery. Is that fair, Kathy?
Yes, that sounds right. What about the ARPA funds that came in for that? Is that included in that?
There are no ARPA funds are reflected on this.
Okay.
So all of those allocations that were made are on a separate project sheet, basically.
Okay.
And there's still, I forget, 70,000 maybe that hasn't been allocated. We're kind of waiting to make sure what has been allocated can be covered with the funds that were set for that. But that's the money that's on the side. See streetlights. Years ago, we went through and we put LEDs in all the streetlights. At the time, that saved us about 15,000. So that was nice when it happened, but now that's just what the norm is. So, highway guys don't like it. It's in their department, but that's where that is. Just as a note, we are having problems with the exterior lights on this building. So those who are attending in person tonight will find it's very dark outside, but that's because all of the lights that are attached to the building, there's a short in the system somewhere. So we have somebody looking at it, but it's kind of dark. So be careful if you come to, the parking lot lights work, but if you're here for a basketball practice or something like that, it's kind of dark. It has nothing to do with the streetlight budget.
It's a question, Tom.
Yes, ma'am.
If I understand correctly, we budgeted 37,500 for electricity, and we actually spent 53. And I'm just wondering why it's so different from.
That may have been a trend down from the prior years, and then I can't think of anything that happened unless we had a monthly bill swap over years, but we usually adjust for that. I think 37 is low. Yeah, I don't have an answer that says we changed something in the way we do it. All of our power for the municipal building and the water system and the sewer system is allocated to various forms of renewable energy. This building and the wastewater treatment plant is almost entirely allocated to Martinsville Hydro. If you're going in Heartland, there's a little dam on the right-hand side. That's where we get that power. Yeah. The rest of it is allocated toward the various solar arrays that you see around town. So we're seeing all of that. And that may go thinking we were going to save a little more money on something when we go back 18 months before the billing started, but again, I'm just guessing what that would have been. It just 30, I can't recall seeing a year where we only spent $37,000. When you get into vehicle maintenance, that's what it sounds like. You see a variety of truck payments where you see there's nothing in the fiscal 24 budget and a whole bunch in the fiscal 25 budget. Again, some of that has to do with delay in replacing some vehicles. The other thing that has to do with is last year when we were doing the budget, I remember one of the trucks, we said we won't pay that out of the budget. We'll take it out of the capital reserve. So this year, everything is, right now included in the budget. Solid waste management is collecting the trash around town as well as the dump days. The dump days run about $7,000 to $8,000 a day, and we do 2 of them. That covers what the highway department does. I kind of look at them as our municipal ambassadors. There's a lot of people say they don't use the rec department, or they don't use the fire department, they don't use the police department, but everybody who's on a road almost that gets plowed or has potholes or has clogged up stormwater drains or whatever that happens to be. And while I know that like this Monday was not different than many other days after a snowstorm, where there are a variety of observations of the abilities that we have to plow the roads, both positive and negative. I can say that everybody but one lives in town. They are conscientious. We whack somebody's yard, we come back and we clean it in the spring. We whack somebody's mailbox, we get them a new mailbox. They are on specific routes. Every snowstorm obviously is different on how quickly they can get around, but that's handled on a very routine basis on how that all goes. Like I said, I don't know that having an extra plow as part of the fleet would be worth the expense of the driver in a truck, but I can't imagine doing everything with less than what we have. Yeah. And I say this every year, we don't, as we always say, we're half a town. We don't have all that many miles of roads, but when you think of other towns of similar populations than ours, they're not doing sidewalk plowing and sidewalk maintenance. We have to use sand on the dirt roads and sand and salt on the paved roads. So that means swapping out how that happens. We can't just keep the trucks loaded with the same stuff all the time. So it's a little more complicated than a town that's maybe have twice as many roads, but they're almost all dirt. They can dedicate one to paving. So nights like tonight, when you're not really sure what you're going to get, they're all going to be out working, and I'd say I'm proud of the guys and what they do. They work hard when they're working. I know they look at the weather and they're not too disappointed when it's not snowing. But they're there when we need them.
So we saved a little money by having no snow until now?
Yeah, it used to be, even if it didn't snow much, it would always snow on New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve and any day that was a holiday. So they get double time and a half to run around and do all that. This time we made it through the holidays without really having to do that. So we haven't saved it yet.
We haven't.
When we get to May, when it finally stops snowing, maybe we'll have saved it. So that's good. It's hard, looking, there's not very many things in the budget that are linear. Snow is one of those things that when it comes, and there's no option to just say, oh, we ran out of money to plow. We're not going to do it this time. So
Do we still have public access to salt and sand?
we do. Down on Central Street, we have our salt and sand shed, and there's always a pile out there that you can go. Contractors can't fill up at anybody that has a need for some buckets of sand or salt. That's always there for them. Yes, sir.
So to kind of revisit what happened in last year's budget, the increase for the vehicle operations and maintenance is 83,000. Looks like it's kind of more accurately, about $6,000 increase with over last year, because the other 80,000 comes from the fact that we didn't pay any of the bills due on all the equipment out of the town budget. We pulled it out of the capital fund. Is that
Well-
basically what we're looking at? Because that's kind of what it looks like here, that we kind of just borrowed from Peter to pay Paul, and now it's time to take Peter.
Well,
Where are you? On what page?
this is page 14,
14. Okay.
top right, maybe.
Line items 512 through 519.
Yeah, well, so let me see which ones are, so the Ford F-350, the 14,000 and the 2,700, that's new this year, so that wasn't deferred from last year.
Okay.
The sidewalk tractor was paid from last year. The Freightliner, was not, that 32,000 and, you know, frankly, I will be suggesting a similar strategy when we get down to it. The idea is if we don't put it in the budget, we do have capital reserves that we can pull from. And like, we didn't have to take everything from capital this past year because we ended the year in a good enough position that we were able to, you know, they weren't budgeted to pay for out of there. So, anytime you don't budget for a known expense, you're just delaying the inevitable. You're not, I'm more supportive of doing something like this than I am, say, you know, it is a fairly common practice. You say, well, we don't want a 5% tax increase. We only want a 3% tax increase. So let's take a few $100,000 out of our reserve fund and apply it towards our revenue to buy down the tax rate. Well, there's nothing you can do about that. That's, you're not doing anything to reduce your expenses for next year. This is, if we didn't have, and I'll be going into the capital budget next, you know, the 700,000 or so in there. Yeah, thank you very much. You wouldn't even be able to consider this, you know, honestly, if we didn't have that money, we also probably wouldn't be buying the equipment that we've had. It's one of those things, you know, gosh, I probably told the story 14 times now. When I got here, we had $43,000 in the capital fund, and I started in August. By December, one of the axles broke on our dump trucks, and we went over to Reed's and bought a used truck for 43,000. Now we had zero money and a truck that was kind of on its last leg, and that wasn't the only one. And I personally have a problem asking people to go out and do the work that they do if they don't have the equipment that works. And you imagine if you're mowing your lawn and your lawnmower breaks in the middle of it. Well, imagine your job's out there to plow the roads and your truck breaks down at 11:30 at night in the middle of a snowstorm, and your job is to get all the roads plowed. That happens anyway, even with new stuff. But when you budget to have equipment that's not within its useful life, I don't think that's fair to the staff. And I think that's one of the big things we have overcome. Our highway fleet's in decent shape. Despite the ladder truck, you know, we were having ambulances in the fire department that were leaking exhaust into the cabs, you know, stuff like that. I mean, it was bad. It was just years of neglect on the fleet. So I expect people to show up and do the job that they're paid to do. And if they accept their paycheck, I expect their best effort. But I think they can expect to have the tools that they need to do the job that they're being asked to do. So every iteration of the budget has been supportive of putting money into the capital reserve, into the reserve fund. Everybody's been supportive of maintaining a solid fleet. And we're not flipping them out every 5 years. You know, it's more like 7, but we're not doing 12 years. I mean, the truck if we ever get this new truck, and the truck that it's replacing is a 2007. So that's old. We spent 30 grand a few years ago to have it completely rebuilt, so it's not as bad as it would sound, but we're in a good spot when it comes to the equipment. A good point about deferring the expense. It doesn't go away. It gets deferred. Any other questions about the highway?
I'm impressed about the longevity of the folks who work in the crew. Sounds like they're pretty committed.
They are. They're local and committed. And I think I've mentioned most of my peers are down a significant number in their highway departments. And again, it's another one of those jobs you can't say, oh, we'll plow next Wednesday. You know, you plow when you need to plow. So we're thankful for that.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to move on to the capital plan. That is a separate stapled thing in your budget. I think I gave myself one.
Here's this.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So we're looking at 5-year capital plan fiscal 25. Quick recap is this is something that I'm going to say we're required to do. Our auditors, financial institutions like to know that we are putting some thought into what our loosely framed capital needs are over the next 5 years. You know, behind the scenes, I won't go into the whole thing, but we have inventories on our roads, inventories on our buildings, inventories on our culverts, inventories on our water and sewer lines, all of those things, and all of that is capital. And we have a capital asset log that lists all the values and depreciations and all of that kind of stuff. And what we do for paving, for example, and we're going through this right now. In November, we got an updated townwide road inventory. So that lists all the roads and it lists the condition of the roads based on, good, fair, poor. We also have a culvert inventory that the Regional Planning Agency does for us. We have priority lists from an engineering firm on our water and sewer distribution systems under the road. So separate from this capital plan, we look at all of that and we come up with a priority list that we look to have on hand, maybe do some pre-design so that we can go out into the world and look for funding sources. There's a lot of different things when it comes to water systems and sewer systems and roads and that. So that we're ready to go. We can say, oh, here's a grant opportunity. Let's put that in there and see if we can get it. The paving that was done out on County Road this year was one of those. It was about 200,000. We got $140,000 grant for that. So that was good to go. So that's like the big picture capital plan. How do we decide where we're going to pave and replace water lines and sewer lines? This is more to do with our major equipment. And essentially it's vehicles and bigger municipal, building maintenance. The way it works is you see the fund balance. That's every year we go through this exercise with the select board and the budget committee. And we say, what do you think about in this case, like the 2025 allocations? And there's numbers on all these lines. You will be asked at maybe next week, if not the week after that, to vote to approve the 5-year capital plan. And what you're saying is if you approve this or whatever the plan turns out to be, that you are going to allocate, if you turn to page, at the very top line on page 2, with the way it came out, this thing says total cash allocation. There's a number that says 115,000. You'd be saying that we're going to allocate $150,000 to our capital reserve for this year. And of that 150,000 are going to be allocated to the lines that you see here. So if, for example, this happens and we look at Freightliner dump truck refresh program that currently has 149,000 in it, and we decide to take some of that money and put it towards a new Freightliner truck, it doesn't require any action of the board. It just happens because the board has already approved to put money there for that purpose. If, however, we find out that our grader is in terrible shape and we have to get it replaced, there's no way around it, and we would like to put a meaningful down payment on a grader, the select board could vote to allocate some funds that were earmarked for a dump truck
Yeah.
and move it to a freight liner. So that's kind of just like a check and balance that you've gone to the board and you said, this is where we think our priorities are. It's not up to me to change those priorities. I have to come to the board and state the case, and the board's got to make the decision to reallocate or not. So in general, the numbers, many of these aren't intuitive, so if you're all right with that, I'll kind of just go down the lines. We have the rec department where you have major equipment. That can be like fencing at the fairgrounds, resurfacing of tennis courts, pickleball courts that have, come into conversation a lot, dugouts into fields, so things that are bigger, so work that's done, at the pond. Trails, and parks, that can be, if we have to do like a big turf, service to the fairgrounds or, something up on the common, there's money set aside that we can go after those things. And that's usually at least equally, if not greater, offset by the Friends of Rec.
So question, why would we look at 2027 and double the amount we put in 2025 or 20? I'm just curious what the reasoning is in that.
Looking out, it would be, we have a number of trails, like Paradise Park isn't in that, but that, there's been discussion, we've talked about redoing the gazebo at
Okay.
there. We've
Yeah.
talked about, making the beach a little bigger, at Kennedy Pond. It's kind of like to put, in the past conversations, like tetherball or volleyball down there. It's really kind of tight, but it's like if we wanted to come along and do something bigger. To that point, when you vote on the capital plan, the only money that is kind of written in stone then is the upcoming fiscal year.
Okay.
Everything else is an estimate and can change in a year. So it kind of reflects what's going on today. You're not committed to any of the out year funding.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification in case I was stuck, but where you say fund balance, that's what we have as of now available for this?
That's what will be available at the end of this fiscal year,
Right.
aside any contributions or
And
takeaways.
the 2025 would be added to that amount.
Yeah.
But we'll probably spend some of what's.
Right.
So, but
There are, with all of the vehicles that are trading out, I expect that we will be, we don't offset the trade, and we've taken cash and then put the cash into the capital reserve. So there could be some contributions that are funded outside of taxation that could come in here, and there can be, particularly if we get to the end of the fiscal year and we say, hey, we need to do this, that, or the other thing with some equipment that could come out. Fire department is next, and you can see the biggest line item is the ladder truck, because we've been talking about a ladder truck forever.
Okay.
And the fire ambulance major equipment, that's something that, that's all of those other things that are tens of thousands of dollars of the equipment that is in a truck. But whether they need a hose thing or they did just get like new jaws of life, Scott Air packs, things like that. But they budget that out. There's no major equipment scheduled to get purchased in the coming year, so that should grow. Police, we had a discussion last year that it's kind of coming along. It says physical and digital infrastructure. That had to do with some upgrades in the police department itself. It was just getting kind of tired down there. I think thanks to Paul, we've got some new to us lockers down that way, yeah. But just some maintenance that's being done in the room down there. As well as, we had originally, going back a few years, we were going to be looking to buy body camera systems. We lease body camera systems, but we've still had conversations about cruiser cams. That hasn't been seemed to be as big a priority lately, but that's where that could be some money to put down on that. You get into the highway department and you see, you look at the age of the equipment, we have some old stuff. And it's one of those things that, I go back and forth about with people who have had, their careers in, this kind of environment as a contractor, is we can't be beating equipment up if it's as old as it is. And most people who've worked for the state or something like that aren't working with equipment as old as we are. So it's got to be one or the other. They treat it okay. The trucks are something that are used every day, but the loaders, backhoes, things like that. The grader is the next big thing that's out there that, it's old. Then on the other side, some of the equipment we share with the water and sewer department, so we can split the payment. Like we got a loader a couple years ago, we split the payments between all three departments. Put that out there, makes it a little more manageable. Street sweeper, that's another one of those things that gets used a lot. I think we got it for $12,000. It was here before I got here. People get mad when we don't sweep the streets. So, I get it, springtime comes around, all the stuff we're putting out there now is still in the street. So someday that's not gonna answer the call of duty, and we'd like to have something set aside to do something similar, like we'll buy another, decent used one.
Do we only use that one, like just springtime? I mean,
Springtime and over the summer.
okay.
Yeah.
So really, it's not a heavy use thing.
No, there are a couple of things that there used to be a better rental market option that has really gone away. But the street sweeper, that would be one example, except everybody who wants to rent a street sweeper wants to rent it at the same time. Yeah. Right? And then they use them and they bring them back, and everybody will tell you the last guy that used it did a terrible job maintaining it, and we do the best job ever until the next town gets it and tells us, so we did a terrible job. The other piece of equipment that's like that is the roadside mower. We would rent a roadside mower for a few weeks every year, and we were at the mercy of when it was available. So it was either you did it in the spring, and by the time, late summer got here, everything had grown too much, or doing it at the wrong time, or spreading seeds of invasive plants, or we're waiting too late and we didn't, people are complaining early. So one of the rental companies closed their doors, and I think we paid $18,000 for a roadside mower. So we have it, it's around. We can now do that as a fill-in when it needs to be done, or when we have a gap in some of the other, warm weather maintenance that's out there. Sidewalk tractor is kind of the same thing. We had an old one. We replaced that a few years ago, but we kept the old one. It's not all that reliable, but when it's running, and we can have two instead of one if we have both people to run it. So that's another thing. People like having the sidewalks cleaned up. I remind people every year that we have an ordinance that says if you do not keep your sidewalk clear, we can fine you $500. So one could argue that cleaning the sidewalks is a courtesy on behalf of the town. I don't like phrasing it that way, but it kind of comes in when people expect that we're out there every single day sanding and plowing the sidewalks. And we know when you go, you got the big windrows there and it's a warm day and it melts and then freezes overnight. We ask that people be cognizant of what's in front of their house or their property and, do their part to help it along. We'll do the heavy lifting with bringing the machines around, but, it's not our technical responsibility. Roads, bridges, buildings down here. There are a number of things that range from painting the Welcome Center or new carpeting in the Welcome Center. We definitely need a new salt shed. The one we have is a leftover from when the State Highway Department was down there. It's pretty old, but more so than being pretty old, it's pretty small. So we can't keep a lot of material on hand. That can be difficult when we're having a winter where we need a lot of salt and we're needing smaller deliveries than what we would like to have to keep inventory on hand. If you flip the page, it goes through the different departments and tells you, what equipment we have, estimated cost, estimated replacement time. You can see they'll have easy ones to look at, a Freightliner, 2016, we're saying we could purchase that in fiscal 25. If that comes to fruition, we would buy it likely at the end of the fiscal year. And the payment wouldn't be due until fiscal 26. All of our vehicles, when we buy them, they're 5-year plans that we make one payment a year. So, that doesn't, this doesn't reflect any additions to our various department fleets, but just shows what a refresh schedule would look like. Banks like seeing that we're planning for replacement, not just waiting till something breaks and moving it along. And the last section is our bond debt. And there's brief descriptions for those who have been around long enough. It would have been nice to have $4.5 million that we weren't spending on that dam. That's just one of the, you see the first one, dam gate repair, then paving and a dam buttress repair. And then different paving grants and then we, paving bonds, and 121 says paving in FEMA. The 2011 Irene storm was finally closed out in 2021, and we had a balance of about $800,000 that was the town share of those expenses. We had a line of credit with Mascoma to do that. We rolled that into a bond. So generally what we do with our bond debt is we go to the town at town meeting, we ask for bonding authorization, generally $1 million. Sometimes it's $1 million for paving, $1 million for water lines, and $1 million for sewer lines. That way, we always know we have a match. If there is, say, a program out there where, maybe we get a $500,000 grant, but we have to put $100,000 or $200,000 into with us, we know we always have that. And we also know that none of this stuff with younger, we're always going to have to do it. So we get that authorization and kind of then just feather it in, kind of using that ballpark of $75,000 a year for $1 million bond. The state bond bank, you tell the state what you want to do. They aggregate all the bond authorizations from around the state. They go to the bond market. And like I've said before, when I was in Connecticut, it used to cost somewhere around $30,000. Didn't matter if you got $1 million bond or a $10 million or $100 million bond. That's about what it costs to go through the process. Here, it's a couple of $1,000s because it goes through the state process. We also currently have bond authorization of $1 million to address blight. We've never pulled anything from that. And we have $1 million to address facilities improvements. As we talked last year, the biggest ticket that's on there is the rec center air handling system. Estimates are between $400,000 and $500,000 to replace that. We're going through a energy efficiency process now. Where the state's got $45 million to offering grants up to $500,000 apiece. So we're doing all the steps to make us eligible for that. So we should be getting the results of an energy audit on the building that was done. And once we get that, we can apply for the grant. But if we don't get that, that may be where we have to put that bill ourselves. So that's what we have out there.
Yeah, so I have a question about the bond, about bonding and having money set aside for bonding. So say we have $1 million bonded for blight. Is that money movable, or are we saying we're bonded for blight? Can you say $250,000 out of the blight bond and just say, for instance, put it to the air handling unit?
No.
Is it the towns? How does that work?
How it works? So in order to have a bond,
Yes.
we have to put a specific question and a specific use
Okay.
on the town meeting call. So if it can be for paving, it doesn't have to be for paving for X, Y, and Z street.
Okay.
Or blight is blight, and when we did that, there was a lot of consternation about, well, how do we know what blight's gonna be?
Yeah.
Well, we haven't seen any yet, I guess. Well, we haven't used the money, but it is there, and we've had a number of conversations that we would never have been able to have
Yep.
about property acquisition or improvement if we didn't have that money. So we have that there, but having the authorization just allows us to get a bond. We don't pay anything until we actually go and get it.
Okay.
So if we have $1 million paving authorization, normally what we'll do is we know we have the money to do the project. We'll have the project designed, we'll award the contract, we'll do the work. Depending on the size of the project, we will either pay for it out of the general fund until twice a year you can go to the market and go to the state and draw on your bond. So, or we get a bond anticipation note, which is you go to the bank, you borrow the money in anticipation of getting the bond funds.
Okay,
So you don't incur the cost until you actually go to the bond bank.
okay,
So, but you can't even vote to change it.
okay,
You could, I guess, vote to not have that authorization. I don't even, the town had voted $1.25 million to do stormwater separation. We decided not to do that project. We never went back and said, remove that authorization. We just never did it.
okay,
And I don't know if there's a sunsetting on that.
okay, thank you.
Just like a line of credit.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That-
anything on a page or
Right, and that was, so when I saw how cheap it was to bond, one of the first things we did is we went and we got a $3 million paving bond and used it exactly like a line of credit. It sat there and we would pull anywhere between 250,000 and 800,000 a year until we went through the whole thing, and we would use that with matches against other things. To be able to do that versus do it, spend 30 grand to go to the market to get the money is I don't often say Vermont does a lot of things the best possible way, but that's a really good thing that they do.
Questions?
Okay. Next week, we'll talk about more stuff. If I recall, it's administration, municipal insurance, things like that. And last week, I kept saying, we're all gonna be fine. It's gonna be okay. Don't worry about it. And that necessarily turn over to be the most reassuring thing to do. I'll tell you now what my expectation is that I've been talking to all the department heads. Kevin mentioned a little bit, I probably don't need as much for ambulance maintenance, things like that. That we're going through and we're finding, we'll say a couple of percent, somewhere around 125 to 150,000 in all the various operating lines. And if I haven't said this already, I'll say now that all of those are estimates. Not everything is going to go the right way. Not everything's going to go the wrong way. So I think we can work within a couple percent. We can guess that well. And my recommendation is going to be to pull all of the vehicle payments out. And that'll save us a couple $100,000. It won't save us, it'll defer a couple $100,000. And I think if we go into the fiscal year, this comes out sounding wrong. I'm going to say being as austere as possible. There's a lot of little decisions that are made all the time about if we have an opening because of somebody leaving, we don't jump and hire them right away. If we wait to the last quarter of the year on things like, do we need to buy new tires for the loader? Things like that. I don't want to imply that you hear a lot, well, we got to spend it this year, I won't get it next year. None of the department heads operate that way. I think there have been enough people involved in the budget long enough. The numbers come in pretty close. You hear from the department heads what they do to stretch money, to get grant money, to do things a different way. But they also get it when they don't have it to spend it. I can't tell them, well, you're never going to get it. Kevin, like his supply lines, he needs bandages and he needs this and he's going to have to buy them. But they're pretty good at managing the bottom line. And, I would hope some things break the right way And maybe if we take a couple 100,000 in payments out, we only need to cover 75 at the end, or maybe we need to do the whole 200, but by that time we're gonna have 8 in there. So that's what savings are for. I really look at this as an anomaly. This isn't how the world's supposed to work, to have these kind of gyrations. And that we're gonna have a very similar conversation this time next year. Because we're not gonna be saying, let's have a 2.5% increase. It's gonna be, we gotta get over the hump. So if we did just those things, we would be looking at a neighborhood of 7%, which is a huge tax increase. But, so far, no one's saying I want structural changes in the departments. And I can't see deferring any other expenses along the way. And the last thing I'll say about it is I'm not hearing a hue and cry that my taxes are too high. I'm hearing more about I want more stuff. And when I look at the 12 years of tax increases, it's under 3%. So I think we have earned a reputation for being careful and conservative with the town money. And I don't think you have to look at the town to say the world's upside down right now. It's just tough. So anyway, that's what I had to say this week. You have a couple of weeks to figure out why I'm wrong and to do something different, but that's the general direction.
So I guess I wonder if people are really worried about the tax increase when they're not here, being part of the conversation. That puzzles me. And maybe people aren't too worried, but I don't know.
You can either say complacency, apathy, or trust. I prefer to look at trust. What's that?
Ignorance.
That's exactly the word I'm using.
And I think the problem is when you talk in percentages and everything, they don't get it. When you say you're gonna pay another $1,200 next year in taxes, oh, they can get that.
Yeah.
And by the way, we don't mean 1,200 taxes. We mean if you're paying 6,000 in taxes, you're gonna pay 7,200 in taxes, then all of a sudden the bells and the whistles and you start screaming and say, well, you already voted for the budget.
Right.
So I think it goes back to, Mary and I've had ad nauseum conversations about this. People have no idea what happens here.
Mm-hmm,
That's right.
mm-hmm,
They don't know what their government is
right.
and what it does. There's a whole representation of government on the news every night, and every one of the members of our government are just playing high school drama and not talking about the real issues nationally, statewide, or locally. We're not talking about healthcare costs, which the town has to pay now. Significant increases in healthcare costs. We're going to see that in the insurances when we talk about that. I think it's next week,
Mhm.
right? And they don't pay attention to this meeting. What do we got? 4 or 5 people? And of those as well, how do we do that? We've got Linda, hi Linda. And that's it, right? The rest of them are select board members.
Mike in the back.
And Mike, oh, sorry, Mike. Okay. And it's gonna be one of these things that people just aren't gonna get it until they get there, and then they're gonna scream and yell about how unfair it is. But it is a serious problem. Windsor, I said it before and I'll say it publicly again. It's not our expenses, it's our revenue. Our problem is revenue. And we've been somewhat complacent, somewhat self-destructive, by not encouraging certain developments and making things happen to increase the tax base on a timely basis. But I've been through this whole thing and I can tell you right now, I don't see any out of hand spending. I see some incredible increases that I think, I know that we can sharpen a pencil a little bit on. That's not gonna make a significant change.
Mhm.
But my feeling is that we've got to wake up and really take advantage of some of the things that we can take advantage of. And the 2 things that cost us most money are the 2 biggest assets we have for selling Windsor on anybody, and that's the police and fire.
Mhm.
Nobody has these assets around us. In fact, they're utilizing ours because they don't have them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's gotta be an encouragement. to have and invite development and businesses in the town if we just can figure out a way to deal with it. And that's part of the conversations that I meant before about paradigm change and thinking about what we do.
So the paradigm changes you're talking about would not impact this budget, just from what I'm,
We're
okay,
talking four, but you can't do anything now.
okay.
We can't
I
make a
agree.
major change for about 4 to 5 years when we actually see a road that's gotten a lot better, because it takes that long to put a project through, get it approved, get it constructed, and get it taxed, okay? And it could take longer because in order for it to happen, we may have to abate it. Say, we'll give you an extra couple of years tax-free just to help you build the thing. But after all that stuff happens and settles out, the future of our kids and the future of the town is going to start settling because it's going to be growth, and growth brings growth. When a town becomes hot, place to invest, the investors are comfortable with it. They feel like investment's solid. They're willing to do more investments. And other people say, hey, look, that worked out. He made some good money there. I mean, we have to realize we expect the developers to make money. Some people I heard in the last meeting that we had about a possible development said, oh, they're going to make money off of it. Well, yeah, that's the whole point of it. You know, otherwise, who's going to do it? So the point is that revenue is the key, and it's going to take time. But we have to work on it now.
Does everybody know what a Dillon's rule state is? Raise your hand.
I'm not exactly
Okay.
thinking
I-
about it.
Tom, go ahead and just explain it.
What's that?
Just explain it again.
Just explain it. Don't embarrass people with the civics lesson. It goes to Cliff's point, and it just is, I think, a little more discouraging. There's home rule states and there's Dillon's rule states. Dillon's rule states, which Vermont is one, says that a municipality cannot do anything unless specifically enabled by the legislature. That's why if you have a charter, the legislature votes on your town charter, it makes it a part of state statute. A home rule state means you can do anything unless the legislature tells you you can't. So when you think about what we have control over on the big picture of things, that even if you're not paying attention to what's happening here in Windsor, most people know there aren't a lot of houses around. Most people know there's not a lot of houses being built around. Most people know that there's pressures on the state budget, but they don't know how they get fixed because they're doing the same thing. I want more, and these little constituencies are saying, I want more services for things. The unique thing about municipal government, whether you like it or not, it's pretty much still what democracy is. I mean, this is a representative democracy here, not pure, but the town meeting's pure. And like we talked about, when the state says we need a little more money, let's just put a tax on municipal, on ambulance services. They're not answering to anybody. I mean, technically they're answering all of us, right? But when they say, well, we're not going to support addiction treatment, that falls to the municipality, and we're picking, we don't have any place to go after us. The other thing is, if your income is a sales tax or an income tax, you don't have to change the rate in order to make more money, right? Municipal taxes are the only ones where you have to go to the taxpayer every year and say, I am going to raise your rate. And this is how much it's going to cost you. Imagine if the state legislature had to do that for their spending, that everybody in the state, they'd said, I'm going to change your rate. This is how it's coming out of your paycheck. There would be a little more accountability. It's like it or not, this is where we are. We're the bottom rung of all of the government. It's where everything falls down to. And in the meantime, we're trying to build things up. I won't get on a long soapbox, but at the prison public forum where the discussion was whether we should build things out at the prison. That would probably, that idea that was on paper would probably reduce the average Windsor property taxes by 20%. That's assuming that there is capacity in the school. We know that there's capacity in our sewer treatment plant. It has a water system that would have to be built to that capacity. So that wouldn't implement us. And looking at the roads that they have in there, we're looking at another 40 minutes of plowing. So it's not going to really do that. So I've lived in enough places to see population ebb and flow and the services that go along with it. So I would say most of that's going to be a net positive. There are comments that obviously people don't want to see that, which is fine. Everybody's got the right. But when the state is saying we want to encourage development in the designated downtowns where there's already density, where there's already infrastructure, where there's already that, and either they're not honest enough to tell you, or they're not informed enough to know that when you go to Agency of Natural Resources, they'll tell you there's brownfields there, there's flood regulations there. There's all of these reasons why you can't build that. I've probably said it 10 times, but I'm sure people still aren't hearing it. $1 million to clean up the free land for that apartment building. We have a vacant lot that the town owns right next door. We can give that to somebody and it will cost them $1 million to clean it, that if that lot was across the river in Cornish, they wouldn't have to pay. Because Vermont chooses to have more stringent environmental laws. You want to go to the legislature and change the environmental laws, people will be up in arms. But when you wonder why none of this stuff is happening, it's because there is layer after layer after layer of regulation that is saying we prefer open space, we prefer environmental protections, we prefer a social network. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that that's why it doesn't happen. It's not a coincidence. You're not seeing expansion and development. So be involved locally, but also be involved at the state level. Like, just pay attention. Oh, Kathy sends me things. Hey, here's a piece of legislation that's out there. You know, and on the positive side, then I promise I'll be done. The Capitol in Connecticut building looks almost just like the Capitol building here. In Connecticut, they built what was called the Legislative Office Building, which is this big building. They attached to it and they filled it up with legislators and their staff. Vermont doesn't have that. You go up there and it's like going in someone's living room for a hearing room. There's used furniture in there. You meet the people head on. I thought this thing was just a legend.
There's no security. It's even scarier. You just walk in. There's no security.
Nope, it's like, you know, when you read about what Washington was like back when, you know, the early guys were there. The board, where people take legislation and they pin it to the board and they start taking them down when they don't have the legs to keep going. It is pretty direct government. I mean, the access that we have to our legislators, commissioners, secretaries is pretty impressive, but you have to use it to make a difference. And you can go and give them your ideas and they can say, I just don't see it that way. I don't think you're speaking for the majority of our constituency. And that's fine that they do that, but we don't hold anybody accountable. So, all right, I'm done.
We may add that Tom is very popular in Montpelier, by the way.
I'm not sure that's true. Nobody knows who anybody is. You know what? Our state legislators, oftentimes we don't see, me and them don't see eye to eye, but they have always been supportive of issues that directly affect us. I'll say that.
So can I clarify something? Okay, the prison property, I heard lots of talk in the last meeting about when we get to make the decisions and when it gets turned over to our control. People are saying that, if not in person, in writing. My understanding is we're never going to have control of that. It's state property unless they choose to give it to us. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, so I've seen it in writing. I've heard people say, when we get to make decisions, and I'm thinking that's not real.
Is it inconceivable that the state would say, well, why don't we just give it to the town? They could do that.
Right, they could, but they're going to have to do
They're
that
not
before.
going to, though. They're going to
No.
use it for state.
I agree.
It's not going to get turned over, and I doubt that it'll be used for private property.
I agree, but I just feel like there's a misconception in the general public at that meeting and after the meeting that says we are going to get control over what happens.
Well, in fairness to everybody who doesn't know how things work, including me, right now it is a state-owned property
Right.
that has state-owned stuff on it.
Right.
That presentation implied basically public sector development.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? If public sector development happened on there, they would, in one way or the other, transfer the ownership of that property to the private sector.
Right.
So everything in town is owned by the private sector. You own your house, you own your house.
Yeah.
So then it would come that way. So in that sense, it would fall under the control of the town, but that's much different than state of Vermont. We are going to turn this property over to the town of Windsor.
Yeah.
You're on the hook for its operation and maintenance.
A decision.
Do whatever you want with it.
Yeah,
Right. That's never happened. Not only that, I think there's some cleanup that needs to be done there.
I'm sure there,
oh, yeah.
there is.
Sure, there is some interesting mysteries under the foundations in some of those buildings that they left.
That's kind of, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. 'Cause
Yeah,
I'm
right.
hearing otherwise, that people have different opinions.
There's, if it goes private sector way, one of the other big conversations was our zoning does not, right now it's 10-acre residential zoning or a prison. So our planning commission is beginning the work of what would it look like? So that's internally, we can choose whatever we want to zone it. The state can't tell us that. The state can say, we don't care what your zoning is, we're putting our state whatever there, do
Yeah.
what they want to do. So I could see how people just inferring from the conversation that the town would end up getting it because we could put our own zoning regulations, it would be development, we would get the property taxes, all that kind of thing, but
Okay.
a lot would happen before anything that's like that took place.
All right. Anything else before we move on to signing orders? Okay, while we sign orders, I can ask for public comment for items not on the agenda. You have 5 minutes dedicated for that topic. No comment? Okay. We can move on to board member comments. Anyone at home want to start? Tara, do you have any board member comments? Can't hear you. She knows we can't hear.
I totally agree, Tara. Great comment. We appreciate it.
We can't hear you, Tara. No.
Something's wrong with her mic. She's calling must be down.
Okay, she said never mind. All right. Ryan,
Yeah, kind of unrelated to the meeting, but just everyone be careful tonight. Supposed to get some pretty significant wind and the snow is going to convert to rain. So we be very careful. We are out traveling and please stay home if you have the opportunity to.
Paul,
I just want to thank everyone who is participating with this budget process. You don't know much. We appreciate it, and I hope the town folk do appreciate all the hard work that everyone does their best to try to, come up with the most fair budget as possible. So thank you, select board members and the budget committee.
yeah, I'd also like to express my thanks for people who are willing to engage
Yeah.
in this conversation because I think it's important. It's hard for us to represent the town when we don't hear from the town about what they want.
What do we have here? Could one of you remote, select board people, get a hold of Riley and, let her know you could come in and since we only have 2 members here tonight, I need one more to sign the orders.
I've got to come in and get some paperwork anyways.
Your Christmas card is still here, Ryan.
Well, you should deliver it. So I'll come get it tomorrow.
Wouldn't want to violate federal law, whatever that is, if I delivered it myself. Huh?
Sorry, municipal post office.
Yeah, there we go. There's our revenue stream.
There
huh?
goes the stamp.
Will law let us do that?
As we're doing this, I have a question for you, Tom. I don't know if you know anything of this. I know some towns will put like a penny or 2 cent tax on stuff bought in the town, how did like Woodstock is like an extra penny or 2 cents at Cumberland Farms. Does that go to the town or is that actually a driving mechanism or is it just a joke?
Municipal sales tax. We
Yeah,
talked
is that a
about that, I think,
joke or is it
when we were
not?
we talked about it when we were talking about the cannabis, that you couldn't just specifically tax cannabis and not, you have to tax everything. But I think my thought on it is we have a hard enough time bringing business and stuff to Windsor. Now, to say, I mean, we have a fairly robust downtown, I think, compared to other small towns. But I think you add a municipal sales tax to that, I don't know that it benefits you enough to be one of the few towns with a municipal sales tax.
Yeah, but does it generate? Does anyone know if it actually, does anyone know a
No,
number?
It does, for town, like Woodstock,
Thank you.
they have a very,
But they have,
well,
Big
the one
lot of
thing, they have
business.
a big tourism thing.
yeah, that's what I'm talking
So that
about.
they have a meals and rooms tax as
Sure.
well as a local option sales tax.
Yeah,
The theory would be people come in and visit, they pay more while they're there and they go back home happy to have paid more.
yeah,
If you don't really have a lot of visitors to town,
yeah,
you're just taxing your own people in a different way.
right.
So, I mean, you could make the argument, people go to like Artisans Park or something, you'd make a little bit there, but it isn't a very friendly thing.
Yeah.
There's another, personal property tax on equipment. I think there's 60 or 70 towns in Vermont that do that. So like you look at Simon Pierce, for example, we tax their building, but all the equipment inside we don't tax.
Yeah,
If you're trying to be competitive,
not a good idea.
not a good idea.
Right, I was
You know,
just wondering what if,
Yeah, it's a cost benefit, like it's just different ways to get
Yeah,
things in.
Yeah,
We've advocated in the past about let's say the state put in an extra 1% on as a sales tax. I'm not out doing that, but then that gets allocated to the municipalities. It's another income stream. You share, the income is coming from the people in your community, that kind of thing. But that means, as we see like with the cannabis thing, no, we're gonna tax the bejesus out of it. We're not giving municipalities anything, so the state needs its own money.
yeah, believe me, I can't stand it, I hem and haw every time I do it. I feel like I'm being nickel and dimed every time I get some, it irritates me. I was just wondering if there was actually a revenue stream.
Yeah, for the ski resort towns,
Yeah,
Woodstock, things like that.
So, I think we're ready to adjourn. It is eight, what is it?
Let's say